You pull up a tomato plant that looked thirsty yesterday. The soil clings to the root ball, dark and wet. The roots are brown, soft, and coming apart in your fingers, and that is the trap. August heat makes the hose feel like the safest thing in the yard. I used to think the same way. Wilted leaves meant water, so I watered again. But a plant can look desperate for a drink while the real problem is already sitting in soil that's too wet. Same droopy leaf, opposite cause. And the good news? The fix costs nothing, and it takes about 10 seconds. There are 5 reasons daily watering can leave your plants drowning in August, even while they look thirsty. The 4th is the one I want you watching for. It looks almost exactly like thirst. That's why trying to save it can backfire. Before you water again, you need to know which problem you are actually looking at. Number 1. The oxygen starvation reason. Daily watering steals the air your roots need. You water your tomatoes and zucchini in the morning before work, coffee still in your hand. You water again at night when you get home, feeling like a good gardener for doing double duty. Double duty, you call it. By the 2nd week, the leaves are still yellow, so you add a 3rd watering just to be safe, convinced the heat is winning. Here's the part no one explains when they tell you to water more. Your soil already had air stored inside it. And every extra pour of water shoves that air straight out the door. Picture a kitchen sponge full of tiny holes. Squeeze it dry and those holes fill with air. Hold it under the tap without letting go, and every hole fills with water instead, until there is nowhere left for air to sit. Your soil works the same way. Roots breathe through those air pockets the same way you breathe through your nose. Water it morning and night, day after day, and the roots end up sitting in water with no air at all. They stop pulling moisture up the way they should. The leaves droop and go yellow, even though the dirt underneath is soaked through. Once you see that, the rest makes sense. You are not underwatering. You are flooding the one thing roots need just as much as water: air. So before you touch the hose again, push one finger down about 2 inches to your first knuckle. If the soil still grabs your finger with real moisture, walk away and skip that round entirely. Water only when that spot has gone dry. This does not apply the same way to pots and raised beds. Containers dry out fast in a heat wave, fast enough that they may genuinely need water every day. The lesson is not to stop watering daily forever. It is to stop watering out of habit without checking the dirt first. Your plant is not thirsty, it is drowning, and it's continually tell the difference. Number 2, the shallow root trap. Light daily watering trains roots to stay weak. Here's the part that makes daily watering worse in a heat wave, not better. It makes your plant weaker exactly when it needs to be tougher. 3 summers ago, I tried keeping a zucchini plant happy through a heat wave with nothing but a watering can every morning before work, filling the same 8 inches of dirt around the stem. Through June and July, the plant looked great. Then, one afternoon in early August, with the temperature sitting at 100 degrees, it just folded. Leaves flat by 2 in the afternoon and never came back up. I never once thought to check what the roots were actually doing down there. This is the piece that gets skipped in every watering guide. Roots go where the water is, and nowhere else. If water always shows up in the top inch or two, the roots have no reason to go looking anywhere deeper. Think of it like digging a well. If someone hands you a full bucket every single morning, you never learn to dig past the first foot of dirt. But if that bucket only shows up once or twice a week, you start digging deeper to find water on your own. And eventually you hit a supply that does not run out the second the sun gets hot. Your plant's roots make the exact same calculation. Water a little every day and roots stay lazy and shallow, right where the topsoil dries out first and fastest under direct sun. Water deep and less often, and roots chase that moisture down, sometimes a foot or more into the ground. into soil that stays cool and damp long after the surface has baked solid. That is exactly why my zucchini folded in one afternoon, roots still living in that same shallow strip. So instead of a quick pour every morning, water once or twice a week, deep enough that the soil stays damp 6 to 8 inches down. Skip the days in between completely, even if the surface looks dry by noon. In garden soil, a healthy tomato root system in zone 5 through 9 can reach 12 inches deep or more once it has a reason to go looking. If you are working with a container under 5 gallons, this gets more complicated. Those roots simply do not have the room to dig deep the way a plant in open garden soil does. For pots that small, the finger test matters more than trying to force roots downward that have nowhere left to go. A shallow root system is a plant with no backup plan when the heat actually arrives. Number 3. The nitrogen washout. Frequent watering rinses your fertilizer away. There's a third cost to daily watering, and it shows up on your next trip to the garden center. If you've bought a second bag of fertilizer this month because your plants still look pale, this is probably why. That's another bag of fertilizer you didn't need to buy. Nobody mentions this until the plant is already limping along on food it never actually got to eat. Nitrogen dissolves in water almost instantly, faster than nearly anything else you feed your soil. Picture a guest who just sat down at a full table and the whole table gets yanked out from under him before he takes a bite. Dinner's over before it starts. Every time you water, that is what happens to the nitrogen sitting in the root zone. It rides the water down, past where the roots can reach, or straight out the bottom of the bed. Water once a day, and you are pulling that table away daily. The roots never get a real meal, even though you fed them plenty. I ran the numbers on this once, and they never lined up. You end up with pale, slow-growing plants that look starved. So you buy more fertilizer, water it in the same way, and watch the same pale leaves come back a week later. For tomatoes and zucchini heading into flowering and fruit set, that steady nitrogen supply matters most, and pale leaves right now usually mean a supply problem, not a shortage in the bag. So instead of another bag of fast-dissolving fertilizer, reach for a slow-release version when you know you will be watering often through a stretch like this one. It feeds a little at a time instead of dumping everything into water that is about to wash straight through. If you'd rather not buy anything new, a thin layer of compost worked into the topsoil does almost the same job for free. If your soil runs more towards sand, or you are growing in containers, this hits you hardest, since water moves through fast and takes the nitrogen with it. Clay-heavy soil holds on to both water and nutrients longer, so the washout is slower there. You are not underfeeding your plants. You are feeding the ground beneath them and calling it done. But the next one on this list is the reason your plant can look thirsty and waterlogged at the exact same time, and it is the one that fools even people who have been gardening for years. Number 4. The root rot takeover. The wilt is rot, not thirst. And here is the trap that kills plants. Thirst and rot look almost identical. You pull up the tomato expecting to find it just needs water. Instead, the roots are black, mushy, and smell like a swamp. That is your proof. Here's what's actually happening under the soil while you're refilling that can. Soil that never gets a chance to dry out is exactly what two of the most common root rot fungi, Phytophthora and Pythium, need to take hold. They move into roots that are already sitting in water with nowhere for air to go. And once they get in, those roots turn brown, then black, then soft. A rotted root cannot pull water up into the plant anymore. The pipe you were counting on is broken. You cannot see any of this by looking at the plant from above. The only proof is underground, and by the time leaves droop, the damage below has usually been building for days. So the leaves wilt and yellow exactly the way they would if the soil were bone dry, even though you could wring water out of the dirt around the stem. You see wilting, so you water more, certain you are helping. The soil gets wetter, the fungus spreads faster. Every day you wait makes it worse. That loop kills a plant faster than anything else on this list. By the time you notice, the roots are usually long gone. Tomatoes, squash, and cucumbers are the ones most likely to end up here when the soil stays soaked through a stretch of heat, whether you are in Zone 3 or Zone 10. To check instead of guessing, gently pull up one small root near the surface. Healthy roots are white or tan and hold together when you squeeze them. Sick ones are dark, slimy, and come apart in your fingers. I was reading an Ohio State University Extension bulletin on tomato root disease one evening, and one line stuck with me. Pythium root rot leaves roots discolored, soft, and falling apart, the same way overwatered roots look. Every wilted tomato I had ever babied back with extra water for years. I had actually been drowning slowly instead. That single sentence changed how I look at every wilted plant since. Sandy soil and raised beds with real drainage slow this whole process down, so you have more room for error there. Heavy clay soil and containers without drainage holes are where this moves fastest and does the most damage. Either way, once the rot has spread this far, no amount of watering brings those roots back. The water you added to save it is the same water that is killing it. If root rot hiding behind thirst symptoms is the kind of detail you want in every video, subscribe and hit the bell. Every video on this channel goes this deep, not just the surface tips. Number 5. The midday wilt misread. That noon droop isn't thirst at all, and the last reason is the one that starts the entire cycle. Most people are reading a completely normal reaction as an emergency. I hear the same story every summer from retirees down in Texas. Through the record heat of 2026, one of them kept watering her tomatoes an extra round every time she saw them droop at noon, every single day for weeks. Then an old friend of hers, who has gardened for decades, told her to go look again at 7 the next morning before the sun got high. The plant she thought was dying stood there fully upright, leaves flat and green like nothing had ever happened. The embarrassment fades fast once the relief kicks in, when the fix costs nothing at all. This is where the whole water more in heat advice falls apart. Once the temperature climbs past 90 degrees, your tomato closes off tiny pores on its leaves to stop losing water into the air. Sweat is not available to a plant. Closing those pores is the only air conditioning it has. The leaves droop and curl for an hour or two as a defense, the same way you slow down and duck into shade on a scorching afternoon instead of collapsing from thirst. That droop is not a cry for water. It is the plant protecting the water it already has. University of Maryland Extension calls this physiological leaf roll, tied to high heat and moisture stress, and notes it usually does not hurt growth or yield. Walk out at 7 or 8 in the morning, before the sun climbs high, and look at that same plant. If the leaves are still curled or drooping after a cool night, that is real thirst, and you water deep right then. If the leaves have gone flat and normal again, skip the hose completely, no matter how rough that plant looked at noon yesterday. Same mistake, every time. You saw the droop, so you watered again, which choked the roots, kept them shallow, washed out the nitrogen, and fed the fungus already waiting in soggy soil. Every single time you add water on top of a normal afternoon droop, you set the exact chain of events in motion that the last 4 reasons walked you through. Tomatoes, cucumbers, and squash get misread this way most often, in Zone 3 all the way through Zone 10, and it shows up hardest once the thermometer clears 90. One honest exception here. If the leaves are still down in the morning 2 or 3 days running, or you start seeing yellowing or leaves actually falling off, that stops being a normal heat reaction. At that point, go back through everything else on this list, especially the roots. Your tomato is not panicking at noon. You are, and only one of you is actually in danger. That wet root ball from the opening is the whole lesson. Every reason on this list traces back to the same habit: watering out of fear instead of watering by what the dirt is actually telling you. Wilt does not always mean thirst. Check the soil first. Then decide whether the hose belongs in your hand. One more thing. Especially if you're growing in pots or raised beds, check that every container actually has real drainage holes before this heat wave is over. A container that holds water instead of releasing it turns every one of the 5 problems you just heard about into a fast-forward version. It takes 5 minutes with a drill, and it removes the exact condition root rot needs to take hold in the first place. This afternoon, before you touch the hose, push one finger into the soil 2 inches down next to your worst-looking plant. If it's still cool and damp down there, walk away and skip today's watering, no matter how tired that plant looks by noon. More water was never the fix here. Trusting the dirt for once is.